Picture this. Warriors so terrifying that their enemies believed they had become actual animals, men who could fight through wounds that would kill normal soldiers, elite fighters who served kings and gods alike, transforming into supernatural killing machines through ancient rituals. These weren't mythological creatures, they were real. They were the Berserkers. For over 3 centuries, these warriors dominated battlefields across Europe, their howls echoing from Scandinavia to Constantinople. But here's what's truly shocking. Everything you think you know about Berserkers is probably wrong. Forget the Hollywood image of naked savages high on mushrooms. The real Berserkers were sophisticated religious warriors trained from adolescence in complex transformation techniques that combined psychology, spirituality, and brutal military training. They weren't random madmen, they were the special forces of the Viking Age, organized into elite brotherhoods with strict codes and specialized equipment. They didn't fight naked, they wore bear pelts over armor, they didn't lose control, they channeled divine fury with precision. And their story is far stranger and more fascinating than any movie could capture. Deep in the Danish bogs, archaeologists have found something extraordinary. The Hjortspring boat, dating to 350 BC, contained shields bearing stylized bears and wolves rendered in bronze. This wasn't random decoration, it was evidence of warrior cults that existed centuries before the first Viking longship ever touched water. Even more intriguing, the Gundestrup cauldron shows warriors wearing animal headdresses engaged in what appear to be transformation rituals. These ancient peoples were already exploring the boundary between human and animal, between normal consciousness and something far more terrifying. But here's where things get really interesting. Roman historians encountered these warriors centuries before the Viking Age, and what they witnessed shook them to their core. Plutarch described the Cimbri and Teutones, Germanic tribes who terrorized Roman territories in the late 2nd century BC. These weren't ordinary warriors, they fought with what Romans called supernatural ferocity, wearing animal skins and emitting otherworldly battle cries. Even more shocking, their women fought alongside them, displaying the same animal-like fury. This wasn't just male warrior culture, it was something deeper, woven into the very fabric of Germanic society. The word Berserker itself tells us everything we need to know if we know how to read it. In Old Norse, Berserker combines ber, bear, and serker, shirt or coat. These were literally bear-shirt warriors, men who wore bear pelts as sacred garments connecting them to their animal spirits. Some romantic scholars later claimed it meant bear shirt, suggesting warriors who fought without armor. But that's complete nonsense, a 19th century fantasy. Every piece of linguistic evidence points to the bear connection. Related terms appear throughout Germanic languages, Old High German bero, Gothic cognates, Old English variations, all emphasizing the bear warrior concept. Medieval Icelandic legal texts consistently use berserker in contexts emphasizing animal association, not nudity. Early skaldic poetry from the 9th and 10th centuries treats berserkers as elite fighters worthy of royal retinues, using metaphors that reference bears and divine fury, never nakedness. The linguistic evolution is telling. Early sources portrayed berserkers as honored warriors, while later Christian-era texts increasingly depicted them as dangerous outcasts. This wasn't because berserkers changed, it was because Scandinavian society transformed around them, moving from decentralized warrior culture to centralized Christian kingdoms that viewed berserker practices as incompatible with the new order. To understand berserkers, we need to go back to their spiritual roots, ancient shamanic traditions that stretched across northern Europe for millennia. Archaeological sites like Oberdorla in Thuringia reveal ritual complexes from the 6th, 8th centuries AD where something extraordinary happened. Here, archaeologists found evidence of animal sacrifices, specifically bears and wolves, alongside human warrior burials. But these weren't simple graves. They contained specialized ritual equipment, carved masks, ceremonial weapons never used in actual combat, and intricate animal figures suggesting elaborate initiation ceremonies designed to facilitate spiritual transformation. The Vendel period helmet plates from Sweden show us exactly what these transformations looked like. Warriors appear wearing animal masks engaged in ritual combat. The Torslunda plates are even more revealing. They depict figures that seem to be transforming between human and animal forms, displaying hybrid characteristics that blur the line between species. These weren't just decorative images. These bronze matrices were mass-produced, indicating that animal transformation imagery was standardized warrior equipment, not exceptional individual practice. Every elite warrior understood this symbolism because every elite warrior underwent these rituals. Bog deposits across northern Europe have yielded treasure troves of ritual equipment. The Thorsberg Moor in Schleswig-Holstein contained Roman period weapons deliberately destroyed and deposited in sacred waters, shields decorated with animal motifs, spears bearing runic inscriptions invoking animal spirits. These deposits represent communal rituals where warrior bands offered equipment to gods following successful campaigns, with animal symbolism playing central roles. And this wasn't individual superstition, it was organized military religion practiced by entire armies. Germanic warrior initiation typically occurred during adolescence, and it was brutal. Young men underwent extended periods of isolation in wilderness settings, learning to survive using skills associated with specific animals. Early medieval sources describe these initiates spending months, even years, living as outlaws in forests, learning to hunt, track, and fight using techniques modeled on predatory animals. The Lombard historian Paul the Deacon records that Germanic youth underwent ritual scarification, receiving animal names they carried throughout their warrior careers. These weren't nicknames, they were spiritual identities, permanent transformations that marked these men as something other than ordinary humans. Bear cults occupied particularly prominent positions in early Scandinavian religious practice. Archaeological evidence suggests organized worship centered around cave sites where bears hibernated. The Drachenloch cave in Switzerland provides the earliest evidence for ritualized bear treatment dating to the Middle Paleolithic. We're talking about practices that may have stretched back tens of thousands of years. Similar patterns appear in Scandinavian cave sites from the Mesolithic onward, where bear skulls and bones receive careful arrangement, suggesting continued veneration of the bear's power. This wasn't primitive superstition, it was sophisticated religious practice maintained across millennia. Medieval Scandinavian place names preserve extensive evidence of bear cult activity. Norwegian toponyms like Bjornstad and Swedish locations such as Björka cluster around sites where archaeological evidence confirms early religious activity. These naming patterns, combined with saga references to bear sacred groves and bear temples, indicate that bear worship formed integral parts of pre-Christian Scandinavian religion. The connection between bears and martial prowess operated on multiple levels. Bears represented not only physical strength and ferocity, but also the ability to move between different states of being. Active summer hunting and dormant winter hibernation paralleled the warrior's capacity to shift between peaceful community member and frenzied combatant. But berserkers weren't the only animal warriors. Wolf cults developed alongside bear traditions, but they emphasized completely different aspects of warrior transformation. Wolves represented pack loyalty, coordinated hunting strategies, and survival in hostile environments through collective action. Archaeological evidence from Upåkra in southern Sweden reveals wolf-themed artifacts in warrior graves, belt fittings, weapon decorations, ceremonial drinking vessels, all suggesting organized wolf warrior societies. These weren't just different animal preferences. The distinction between bear warriors and wolf warriors reflected fundamentally different tactical approaches and social functions within Germanic military organization. Bear warriors operated as individual champions or small groups of elite fighters who broke enemy formations through shock attacks. They were the sledgehammer, overwhelming force applied at critical points. Wolf warriors, conversely, functioned as coordinated units employing pack hunting strategies adapted for human warfare. They used encirclement tactics and sustained pressure to exhaust opponents. These complementary approaches allowed Germanic armies to deploy specialized warrior types according to specific battlefield requirements. Need to break a shield wall, send in the bear warriors, need to pursue and destroy a fleeing enemy, unleash the wolf packs. Rituals, scarification, and tattooing practices left permanent marks identifying practitioners and indicating spiritual affiliations. Byzantine sources describe Germanic warriors with elaborate body modifications, scarred representations of animal claws, tattooed animal forms, deliberately filed teeth designed to resemble predatory animals. These modifications serve both practical and spiritual purposes. They marked individuals as members of specific warrior societies while supposedly enhancing their animal transformation capabilities. Imagine facing an enemy whose teeth had been filed into points, whose body was covered in ritual scars shaped like bear claws. The psychological impact would have been devastating. The integration of animal warrior traditions into broader Germanic religious practice created complex ceremonial cycles governing warrior behavior throughout the year. Seasonal festivals aligned with animal behavioral patterns, spring emergent ceremonies for bear warriors coinciding with bears leaving hibernation, autumn hunting rituals for wolf warriors timed with increased pack activity. These ceremonial obligations created structured frameworks for warrior training and spiritual development that persisted across generations. This wasn't chaotic barbarism, it was highly organized military religion with calendars, hierarchies, and institutional structures. But then something changed. The transformation of Germanic animal warrior traditions into the specific Berserker phenomenon occurred within the broader context of Norse religious development, particularly through the emergence of Odin as the dominant war deity. Unlike earlier, more generalized animal cults emphasizing natural predatory behaviors, the Berserker tradition became explicitly connected to divine patronage and cosmic purpose. This marked a fundamental shift from shamanic practices rooted in earthly animal spirits to a sophisticated theological framework positioning Berserkers as instruments of divine will operating within Norse cosmology. The Prose Edda, compiled by Snorri Sturluson in the early 13th century, provides the most systematic account of Berserker integration into Norse mythology. Snorri describes how Odin's personal warriors, the Einherjar, included Berserkers who had proven themselves in mortal combat before being selected for service in Valhalla. This connection established Berserkers not merely as exceptional human fighters, but as participants in the cosmic struggle leading to Ragnarok. These warriors maintained their Berserker abilities in the afterlife, engaging in daily combat that served as training for the final battle against the forces of chaos. Think about that. Berserkers weren't just elite soldiers, they were training for the apocalypse. The Gylfaginning section details how Odin himself possessed the ability to send forth his spirit in animal form while his body remained motionless, a practice called hamfarir, or shape-changing. This divine precedent provided theological justification for Berserker transformation practices, positioning them not as primitive shamanic techniques, but as participation in divine attributes. Odin's ravens Hugin and Munin represented thought and memory flying across the 9 worlds. His 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, demonstrated the god's mastery over supernatural forms of movement and transformation. If Odin could change shape, so could his chosen warriors. The Ynglinga saga offers crucial historical perspective on how Berserker traditions functioned within royal courts and military organizations. Snorri describes how Swedish and Norwegian kings maintained Berserkers as elite bodyguards, positioning them at the forefront of battles where their supernatural fury could break enemy formations. These warriors served aboard royal longships, occupying positions of honor, reflecting their status as divinely inspired fighters rather than mere mercenaries. King Harald Fairhair's unification of Norway in the late 9th century involved extensive use of berserker units. These warriors formed the core of Harald's military forces during his campaigns to subjugate regional chieftains and establish centralized royal authority. The concept of Odr represents perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of Norse berserker theology. This term, linguistically related to Odin's name, encompasses divine inspiration, poetic fury, and battle madness as manifestations of the same fundamental force. The poetic Edda employs Odr in multiple contexts, describing both the inspiration-driving skaldic composition and the supernatural fury transforming ordinary warriors into unstoppable fighting machines. This wasn't random rage, it was channeled divine power requiring specific knowledge and preparation. Havamal, one of the most important poems in the poetic Edda, contains several stanzas describing the acquisition and use of Odir. The text presents this divine fury not as uncontrolled berserker rage, but as deliberate channeling of divine power requiring specific knowledge and preparation. Warriors could invoke Odr through ritual practices including runic magic, animal transformation ceremonies, and direct appeals to Odin for divine inspiration during combat. The relationship between Odr and berserker transformation involved complex theological concepts about consciousness and divine possession. Norse sources suggest berserkers didn't simply become animals, they opened themselves to divine influence that manifested through animal characteristics. Völuspá, a prophetic poem opening the poetic Edda, contains references to warriors who will fight at Ragnarok using supernatural abilities granted by the gods. These passages connect berserker traditions to eschatological beliefs about the end of the world, positioning berserker fury as a divine gift essential during the final cosmic battle. The poem describes how these warriors would maintain their enhanced abilities even after death, continuing to serve divine purposes in the afterlife. This wasn't just military service, it was eternal cosmic warfare. The Ulfhednar, or wolf warriors, developed as a parallel tradition to bear berserkers with distinct theological and practical characteristics. While bear berserkers emphasized individual transformation and overwhelming physical power, wolf warriors focused on pack coordination and collective divine inspiration. Archaeological evidence from Birka and Hedeby reveals wolf-themed artifacts associated with warrior graves that differ significantly from bear warrior equipment, suggesting separate organizational structures and ritual practices. The Ulfhednar tradition drew particularly strong connections to Odin's role as leader of the wild hunt, the supernatural procession of dead warriors crossing the night sky during winter storms. Medieval sources describe how wolf warriors would participate in rituals designed to invoke the wild hunt, temporarily joining the ghostly procession and gaining supernatural abilities from direct contact with Odin and his undead warriors. These practices required extensive preparation, fasting, ritual purification, and specific invocations that differed markedly from bear warrior transformation techniques. Wolf warrior organization reflected the pack structure inspiring their practices. Archaeological evidence suggests Ulfhednar operated in groups of 12-15 warriors, mirroring wolf pack sizes and allowing sophisticated tactical coordination. Grave goods from wolf warrior burials include matching sets of weapons and equipment indicating standardized armament and coordinated fighting techniques. The integration of Ulfhednar into royal military forces followed different patterns than bear berserker recruitment. While bear warriors often served as individual champions or small elite units, wolf warriors formed entire companies that could operate independently during extended campaigns. The Gesta Danorum describes how Danish kings employed wolf warrior units for reconnaissance missions, night raids, and pursuit operations requiring sustained coordination over long distances. These weren't Berserkers' inferior cousins, they were specialized operators with different mission sets. Runic inscriptions from the 10th and 11th centuries provide direct evidence of how Berserkers and Ulfhednar understood their divine connections. The Rökstone in Sweden contains passages describing warriors receiving divine inspiration through animal transformation. Smaller rune stones from Norway and Denmark record individual warriors claiming divine patronage through their animal affiliations. These inscriptions employ specific terminology distinguishing between ordinary warriors and those possessing supernatural abilities granted by gods. This wasn't superstition, it was documented religious identity. The theological framework supporting Berserker traditions required sophisticated understanding of Norse concepts about the relationship between physical and spiritual reality. Berserkers were believed to possess multiple souls or spiritual aspects that could separate during transformation, allowing their animal spirits to manifest while human consciousness remained present. This complex psychology enabled Berserkers to maintain tactical awareness during battle fury while accessing supernatural strength and endurance. Think about that. They weren't losing their minds, they were achieving a dual consciousness, simultaneously human and animal. Ritual preparation for Berserker transformation involved elaborate ceremonies extending over several days. Archaeological evidence from ritual sites in Iceland and Norway reveals specialized equipment used in these preparations. Ceremonial masks, ritual weapons, never used in actual combat, carved animal figures serving as focus objects. These ceremonies required participation of specialized religious practitioners who understood complex invocations and ritual procedures necessary to safely channel divine fury. You couldn't just decide to become a berserker one day. This required years of training under experienced practitioners. The social integration of berserkers within Norse society depended heavily on their religious legitimacy as servants of Odin. Unlike earlier Germanic animal warriors who operated on society's margins, Norse berserkers occupied recognized positions within military and religious hierarchies. Royal courts maintained specific protocols for managing berserker warriors, designated quarters within royal halls, specialized equipment maintenance, ritual schedules aligned with religious calendar requirements. The decline began during the 11th century as Christianization and political centralization made berserker traditions incompatible with new religious frameworks and centralized military command structures. The phenomenon known as berserker gang represented far more than simple combat rage or battlefield hysteria. Contemporary accounts from the 10th through 12th centuries describe a systematic transformation process, fundamentally altering both psychological and physiological states. The Egil's saga provides one of the most detailed descriptions. Berserkers would begin trembling uncontrollably, teeth chattering violently, faces swelling and changing color before onset of their supernatural fury. These physical manifestations preceded complete alteration of consciousness, rendering warriors virtually insensible to pain while dramatically increasing strength and endurance. The preparatory phase typically commenced several hours before anticipated combat, involving complex sequences of physical and mental conditioning. Archaeological evidence from ritual sites at Gamla Uppsala and Tisö reveals specialized preparation areas where berserkers underwent transformation procedures away from main military encampments. These sites contain distinctive circular stone arrangements surrounded by carved wooden posts depicting animal forms, suggesting transformation required both physical space and specific ritual equipment to achieve the desired psychological state. Fasting formed the cornerstone of Berserker preparation, with warriors abstaining from all food for periods ranging from 1 to 3 days, depending on anticipated combat intensity. The Volsunga saga describes how Sigmund's warriors would refuse all nourishment before major battles, consuming only small amounts of water mixed with specific herbs, enhancing receptivity to divine inspiration. This deliberate weakening of the physical body created conditions Norse practitioners believed made divine possession more likely, allowing Odin's battle fury to enter and transform the warrior's consciousness. The fasting process followed specific protocols differing between bear warriors and wolf warriors. Bear berserkers typically undertook solitary fasting in cave-like enclosures, mimicking hibernation conditions, remaining motionless for extended periods while focusing mental energy on invoking animal spirits. Wolf warriors conversely fasted collectively while engaging in coordinated movement patterns, replicating pack-hunting behaviors. These contrasting approaches reflected different animal characteristics each group sought to embody during transformation. It wasn't one-size-fits-all. Each warrior type had customized preparation methods. Meditation practices employed by berserkers incorporated elements modern scholars recognize as sophisticated consciousness-altering techniques. Warriors would position themselves in specific postures that archaeological evidence suggests were standardized across different regions and time periods. Excavations at berserker burial sites have revealed specialized meditation equipment, carved wooden backrests, stone pillows shaped to support particular head positions, bronze amulets designed to focus visual attention during extended contemplative sessions. This wasn't random sitting, it was precision psychological engineering. The meditation process involved systematic visualization of animal transformation, with practitioners mentally rehearsing physical and psychological changes they sought to achieve during combat. Runic inscriptions from meditation sites describe techniques for separating human consciousness from animal instincts, allowing warriors to maintain tactical awareness while accessing supernatural fury. These practices required years of training under experienced practitioners who understood complex psychological mechanisms involved in achieving controlled berserker states. You couldn't learn this from a book. You needed a master. Animal mimicry formed perhaps the most distinctive aspect of berserker preparation rituals. Warriors would spend hours imitating movements, vocalizations, and behavioral patterns of their chosen animal spirits. Archaeological evidence from training sites reveals worn stone surfaces marked with claw patterns, where berserkers practiced moving on hands and knees while wearing metal claw attachments. These training areas also contain acoustic features designed to amplify and modify human vocalizations, allowing practitioners to develop distinctive animal sounds characterizing berserker transformation. Imagine hearing these sounds echo across a training ground. It would have been absolutely terrifying. Bear warriors developed particularly elaborate mimicry techniques involving adoption of quadrupedal movement patterns and specific breathing exercises designed to replicate bear respiratory rhythms. Training sites associated with bear berserkers contained specialized equipment including weighted practice armor, forcing warriors to develop muscular adaptations necessary for effective movement while wearing heavy bear pelts during actual combat. The physical conditioning required for these practices was extensive, with archaeological evidence suggesting berserker training began during early adolescence and continued throughout a warrior's active career. Wolf warrior mimicry emphasized pack coordination and communication techniques, allowing multiple warriors to maintain synchronized movement during battle. Training sites reveal evidence of complex obstacle courses where wolf warriors practiced moving together through difficult terrain while maintaining pack formation. These facilities include carved wooden wolf heads positioned at various heights and angles, apparently used for practicing pack communication signals that allowed coordinated attacks without verbal commands enemies might intercept. This was special operations-level training happening over 1,000 years ago. The role of psychoactive substances in Berserker transformation remains one of the most contentious aspects of modern research. While some scholars have proposed warriors consumed hallucinogenic mushrooms or fermented beverages to induce altered states, archaeological evidence for systematic drug use remains limited and inconclusive. Chemical analysis of residues from vessels found at Berserker sites has identified various plant compounds, but their concentrations appear insufficient to produce significant psychoactive effects. More substantial evidence supports use of mild stimulants and mood-altering substances as adjuncts to psychological transformation techniques rather than primary causative agents. Botanical remains from Berserker sites include various herbs known for energizing properties, including species of Hypericum and Artemisia, commonly used in medieval Scandinavian folk medicine. These substances likely serve to enhance effects of fasting and meditation rather than directly inducing Berserker fury through pharmacological action. And the spiritual framework underlying Berserker transformation drew heavily on Norse concepts of multiple souls or spiritual aspects within individual humans. Berserker transformation involved temporarily suppressing human consciousness while allowing animal spirits to assume control of the physical body. Shamanic elements within Berserker practice reflected continuity with much older circumpolar traditions extending far beyond Germanic cultural boundaries. Archaeological evidence from Sami sites in northern Scandinavia reveals similar transformation practices involving animal mimicry and altered consciousness states, suggesting Berserker traditions incorporated techniques developed by indigenous Arctic peoples over thousands of years. The distinctive drumming patterns associated with Berserker preparation ceremonies show clear connections to Sami shamanic practices, indicating substantial cultural exchange between Germanic and Finno-Ugric populations. The spiritual preparation process required guidance of specialized practitioners, serving as intermediaries between human and divine realms. These individuals, often referred to in sources as cider workers or velur, possessed extensive knowledge of complex ritual procedures necessary for safe Berserker transformation. Their role involved not only conducting transformation ceremonies, but also monitoring psychological states of participating warriors to prevent permanent damage from prolonged exposure to altered consciousness states. This wasn't DIY spirituality, it required expert supervision. Contemporary neurological researchers have identified several mechanisms that might explain extraordinary physical and psychological effects documented in historical Berserker accounts. The combination of prolonged fasting, intensive physical conditioning, and extreme psychological stress can trigger significant alterations in brain chemistry, particularly affecting production of endorphins, adrenaline, and other neurotransmitters associated with pain perception and physical performance. The fasting component would have induced ketosis, a metabolic state producing heightened mental clarity and reduced pain sensitivity. Combined with intensive physical training regimens documented at Berserker sites, this metabolic alteration could account for many supernatural abilities attributed to transformed warriors. Modern studies of extreme athletic performance under stress conditions have documented similar phenomena: dramatically increased strength, reduced pain perception, altered time perception. The psychological aspects align with contemporary understanding of dissociative states and altered consciousness. The combination of sensory deprivation, repetitive movement patterns, and focused visualization techniques employed in Berserker preparation can induce profound alterations, producing apparent personality changes documented in historical accounts. The social psychology of Berserker transformation involved complex group dynamics, reinforcing individual psychological changes through collective expectation and mutual reinforcement. Warriors undergoing transformation together would influence each other's psychological states through synchronized breathing, movement, and vocalization, creating feedback loops intensifying the overall effect. Archaeological evidence from group transformation sites reveals acoustic features designed to amplify and synchronize these collective activities. This was group psychology weaponized for warfare. The termination of Berserker fury presented significant challenges requiring careful management to prevent psychological or physical damage. Historical accounts describe elaborate cooling down procedures involving gradual reduction of physical activity, specific breathing exercises and ritual cleansing, helping warriors transition back to normal consciousness. Absence of proper termination procedures could result in prolonged disorientation or, in extreme cases, permanent psychological damage, rendering warriors unfit for normal social interaction. You couldn't just flip a switch. Coming down required careful management. The integration of Berserker transformation into broader military strategy required sophisticated understanding of both capabilities and limitations of warriors in altered states. Berserkers in full fury possessed extraordinary strength and pain tolerance, but showed reduced tactical awareness and difficulty following complex commands. Military commanders learned to deploy Berserker units for specific tactical purposes, particularly breakthrough attacks against fortified positions or shock assaults designed to break enemy morale through sheer psychological impact. The physical aftermath typically involved extreme exhaustion lasting several days. Warriors emerging from battle fury often experienced complete physical collapse, requiring extensive care and recovery time. The weaponry employed by Berserkers reflected both practical battlefield requirements and spiritual significance of their animal transformations. Archaeological evidence from warrior graves across Scandinavia reveals Berserkers favored weapons complementing their transformed fighting style while maintaining symbolic connections to animal spirits. The most common Berserker weapon was the long-hafted battle axe, typically measuring 120 cm in total length, with broad, crescent-shaped iron heads weighing 1.2 kilo. These axes, exemplified by finds from Mammen in Denmark and Gokstad in Norway, featured extended cutting edges maximizing devastating effect of overhead strikes delivered with supernatural strength. The construction of Berserker axes incorporated specific design elements, distinguishing them from standard Viking Age weapons. Hafts were typically made from ash or oak wood, treated with bear fat, and wrapped with leather strips taken from animals killed during ritual hunts. Iron heads featured distinctive, decorative patterns including stylized bear claws, wolf teeth, or runic inscriptions invoking animal spirits. The Mammen axe, discovered in a high-status 10th century burial displays, intricate silver inlay work depicting intertwined animal forms suggesting divine protection during combat. Spear usage among Berserkers followed different patterns depending on specific animal affiliation. Bear warriors typically employed heavy thrusting spears with broad leaf-shaped iron points designed for close-quarters combat, where their supernatural strength could drive weapons through enemy armor and shields. These spears, measuring 200 to 250 centimeters in length, featured reinforced ash hafts capable of withstanding tremendous forces generated during Berserker attacks. Wolf warriors favored lighter throwing spears that could be used effectively in coordinated pack attacks. These weapons, typically measuring 180 to 200 centimeters in length, featured narrow iron points designed for penetration rather than broad-cutting damage. Sword ownership among Berserkers remained limited to highest-ranking warriors due to enormous cost and symbolic significance. Pattern-welded swords found in Berserker graves display exceptional craftsmanship, with complex steel construction techniques creating both superior metallurgical properties and distinctive visual patterns along blade surfaces. The Peterson Type H swords, commonly associated with Berserker burials, featured broad, double-edged blades measuring 75-85 centimeters in length with elaborate hilts incorporating animal motifs cast in bronze or silver. The most famous Berserker sword discovered at Langeid in Norway displays complex pattern-welded construction, with pommel cast as stylized bear head with garnet eyes. The controversial aspect of Berserker armor usage has generated extensive scholarly debate, with archaeological evidence suggesting more complex reality than popular image of naked warriors charging into battle. Excavations at Berserker burial sites reveal various forms of protective equipment, though often modified or reduced compared to standard warrior gear. Mail shirts found in high-status Berserker graves typically show evidence of deliberate alteration, with sections removed or modified to accommodate animal pelts worn during transformation rituals. The Gemunbu find from Norway provides crucial evidence, a 10th century grave containing complete mail shirt systematically modified by removing sections around shoulders and upper chest, creating openings accommodating bear pelt worn over armor. Shield usage among berserkers followed tactical considerations, prioritizing offensive capability over defensive protection. Archaeological evidence indicates many berserkers carried smaller, lighter shields than conventional warriors, or in some cases abandoned shields entirely during final phases of battle fury. Shields appearing in berserker graves typically measure 60-70 cm in diameter, significantly smaller than 80-90 cm shields, common among standard Viking warriors. The construction incorporated specific design elements reflecting animal affiliations. Bear warrior shields often featured iron boss covers shaped like bear heads, while wolf warrior shields displayed pack symbols or stylized wolf paw prints painted in distinctive color schemes. The tactical deployment of berserkers within Viking military formations required careful consideration of their unique capabilities and limitations. Contemporary sources, particularly the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and various Irish annals, describe how Viking commanders positioned berserker units at critical points where psychological impact and breakthrough capability were most needed. Typical deployment involved placing berserkers at front center of formation, where their terrifying appearance and supernatural fury could demoralize enemy troops while their enhanced strength broke through enemy shield walls. Naval warfare presented particular opportunities for effective berserker deployment. The confined space aboard longships concentrated psychological impact of berserker transformation while limiting tactical disadvantages of their reduced defensive awareness. Archaeological evidence from ship burials at Oseberg and Gokstad reveals specialized positions at prow and stern where berserker warriors were stationed during naval engagements. Positions featured reinforced deck planking and specialized weapon racks designed to accommodate unique equipment requirements of transformed warriors. The Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066 provides detailed contemporary accounts of berserker tactical deployment. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle describes how Norwegian berserkers formed the vanguard of Harald Hardrada's army, positioning themselves at narrow bridge crossing where their individual combat prowess could offset numerical disadvantage faced by Norwegian forces. The account specifically mentions these warriors fought without mail armor, wielding great axes that could cleave through both shield and armor with single blows. The psychological warfare aspect proved as important as direct combat effectiveness. Enemy forces facing berserker units experienced terror, going far beyond rational fear of skilled opponents. The combination of inhuman vocalizations, animal-like movements, and apparent immunity to wounds created psychological effects that could break enemy morale before physical contact occurred. Byzantine military manuals from the 11th century specifically addressed tactics for countering berserker psychological warfare, recommending use of disciplined formations and religious ceremonies to maintain troop morale when facing these supernatural warriors. The terror effect operated on multiple psychological levels modern military psychology can help explain. The uncanny valley effect, where human behavior becomes disturbing when it deviates from normal patterns while retaining human characteristics, created profound unease among enemy forces. Contemporary accounts from Irish monasteries describe specific techniques berserkers employed to maximize psychological impact. Warriors would begin transformation rituals within sight and hearing of enemy forces, allowing opponents to witness gradual change from human to animal-like behavior. The process typically began with rhythmic chanting and animal vocalizations, growing progressively louder and more disturbing as transformation progressed. By the time actual combat commenced, enemy forces had endured hours of psychological pressure designed to weaken their resolve and coordination. This was psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. The comparison between Berserkers and other elite warrior units reveals both similarities and crucial differences in organization, training, and tactical deployment. Huskarls, with the professional warriors serving Anglo-Saxon and Danish kings, shared certain characteristics with Berserkers, including elite status, specialized equipment, and positions of honor within royal households. However, Huskarls emphasized disciplined formation fighting and defensive tactics, contrasting sharply with Berserker emphasis on individual fury and offensive assault. Archaeological evidence from Huskarl burial sites reveals standardized equipment sets emphasizing coordination and mutual support. The training regimens employed by Huskarls focused on formation discipline and coordinated maneuvers, requiring extensive practice and mutual trust. Contemporary sources describe Huskarl training exercises involving complex shield wall maneuvers, coordinated spear thrusts, and defensive formations designed to withstand cavalry charges. And these practices contrasted fundamentally with Berserker training, emphasizing individual transformation and supernatural enhancement rather than collective, tactical coordination. The social integration of professional retainers differed significantly from Berserker organization within Norse society. While Berserkers maintained semi-autonomous status based on divine connections and supernatural abilities, professional retainers were fully integrated into aristocratic households with clearly defined hierarchical relationships. The decline of Berserker effectiveness during the later Viking Age resulted partly from tactical adaptations developed by opponents. Anglo-Saxon and Frankish military commanders learned to counter Berserker psychological warfare through religious ceremonies, disciplined formations, and specialized weapons designed to neutralize Berserker advantages. Increasing use of crossbows and other missile weapons allowed enemy forces to engage Berserkers at ranges where their supernatural fury provided fewer advantages. The evolution of medieval warfare toward more sophisticated tactical systems gradually reduced battlefield effectiveness of Berserker units. The development of heavy cavalry, coordinated infantry formations, and fortified positions created combat environments where Berserker advantages in individual combat and psychological warfare became less decisive. The Battle of Hastings in 1066 demonstrated these changing tactical realities, as Norman cavalry and archery units proved capable of defeating even the most elite Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian warriors through superior tactical coordination and technological advantages. But here's what's truly remarkable. Despite their military obsolescence, Berserkers would have one final chapter, their transformation into royal guards and the eventual collision with Christianity that would end their tradition forever. The transformation of Scandinavian society during the late 8th century created conditions projecting Berserker warriors far beyond their traditional Nordic territories. Population pressures, political consolidation, and technological advances in shipbuilding converged to launch the Viking Age, carrying Berserkers across the known world as integral components of raiding forces, conquest armies, and trading expeditions. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe reveals distinctive material culture associated with Berserker presence from monasteries of Ireland to trading posts of the Volga River system. The initial Viking raids drew heavily on established Berserker traditions while adapting them to new strategic requirements. The seasonal raiding pattern characterizing early Viking activity aligned perfectly with Berserker ritual cycles, allowing warriors to undergo traditional preparation ceremonies during winter months before launching spring campaigns. Excavations at departure points like Ribe in Denmark and Berka in Sweden reveal specialized storage facilities where Berserker equipment was maintained during off-seasons. including ceremonial animal pelts, ritual weapons, and transformation paraphernalia essential to their military effectiveness. The logistics of transporting Berserker warriors on extended maritime campaigns required significant modifications to standard longship designs. Archaeological analysis of ship remains from Skuldelev in Denmark revealed structural adaptations accommodating unique requirements of Berserker units. These modifications included reinforced deck sections where Berserkers could perform transformation rituals during voyages, specialized weapon storage areas designed for their oversized axes and spears, and dedicated spaces for animal pelts and ceremonial equipment. And the psychological impact of Berserkers proved particularly devastating when deployed against monastic communities and civilian populations unfamiliar with Scandinavian military traditions. Contemporary accounts from Irish and Anglo-Saxon chroniclers describe terror induced by warriors who appeared to transform from human to animal during combat, their inhuman vocalizations and apparent immunity to wounds creating panic, often proving more effective than actual military action. The Annals of Ulster record multiple instances where entire communities fled at mere approach of ships carrying Berserker warriors, abandoning valuable resources without offering resistance. This wasn't just military superiority, it was psychological dominance so complete that battles were won before they began. The integration of Berserkers into Viking raiding parties required careful coordination between conventional warriors and these specialized troops. Archaeological evidence from temporary Viking camps across Britain and Ireland reveals distinct activity areas where Berserkers underwent transformation preparations while other warriors maintained equipment and planned tactical operations. These sites typically feature circular arrangements of stones where Berserkers performed rituals, positioned at distances allowing their vocalizations to be heard throughout camp while preventing interference with normal military activities. The seasonal nature of Viking raiding aligned naturally with Berserker ritual requirements, creating synergies enhancing effectiveness of both military and spiritual practices. Spring raids coincided with bear warrior emergence ceremonies, while autumn expeditions matched increased activity patterns associated with wolf warrior traditions. This temporal coordination allowed Berserkers to maintain spiritual connections to animal cycles while participating in military campaigns extending across multiple seasons and geographic regions. The adaptation of Berserker tactics to different combat environments required considerable flexibility in traditional practices. Naval engagements aboard longships confined Berserker movement, but concentrated their psychological impact, while land battles in unfamiliar terrain demanded modifications to transformation rituals developed for Scandinavian forests and mountains. Archaeological evidence from Viking camps in Francia reveals portable ritual equipment designed for rapid deployment, including collapsible meditation structures and lightweight ceremonial items that could be transported efficiently during extended campaigns. The encounter between Berserker warriors and Carolingian military forces created tactical challenges for both sides, influencing the evolution of medieval warfare. Frankish military manuals from the 9th century describe specific countermeasures developed to neutralize Berserker advantages, including use of disciplined infantry formations, coordinated missile attacks, and religious ceremonies designed to counter psychological effects of Berserker transformation. The Annales Regni Francorum record multiple engagements where Frankish commanders successfully employed these tactics, though at considerable cost in casualties and resources. The siege warfare characterizing many Viking campaigns in Francia presented particular challenges for Berserker deployment. Traditional Berserker tactics emphasized shock attacks and psychological warfare, proving less effective against fortified positions defended by disciplined garrisons. Archaeological evidence from siege sites like Paris reveals adaptations in Viking strategy, positioning Berserkers as assault troops, specializing in breakthrough attacks against specific defensive positions rather than general battlefield deployment. The famous Siege of Paris in 845 AD, while not definitively documented as involving berserkers, occurred during a period when such warriors formed integral components of major Viking expeditions. The expansion of Viking activity into the Mediterranean brought berserkers into contact with Byzantine military forces, possessing sophisticated understanding of irregular warfare and psychological tactics. The Varangian Guard, established during the 10th century, represented the culmination of berserker integration into professional military service. Archaeological evidence from Constantinople reveals Varangian warriors maintained many traditional berserker practices while adapting to Byzantine military requirements and Orthodox Christian religious influences. The recruitment of Scandinavian warriors into Byzantine service created unique opportunities for berserker traditions to evolve within cosmopolitan military environments. Contemporary Byzantine sources describe distinctive fighting styles and ceremonial practices of their northern mercenaries, noting their use of oversized axes, animal-themed armor decorations, and pre-battle rituals differing markedly from standard Byzantine military procedures. The Strategikon of Kekaumenos specifically addresses management of these foreign warriors, recommending commanders allow them to maintain traditional practices while ensuring integration into broader tactical frameworks. The Varangian Guard's elite status within Byzantine military hierarchy reflected continued effectiveness of berserker-derived fighting techniques when properly integrated into sophisticated military organizations. Archaeological evidence from Varangian quarters in Constantinople reveals fascinating blend of Scandinavian and Byzantine material culture, with traditional berserker equipment modified to incorporate Byzantine decorative elements and Orthodox Christian symbolism. This cultural synthesis created hybrid warrior traditions, maintaining core berserker characteristics while adapting to new religious and social contexts. The documentation of berserker activities in contemporary chronicles provides crucial evidence for their widespread participation in Viking Age military campaigns. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle contains multiple references to warriors displaying berserker characteristics during major engagements, though chroniclers often interpreted these phenomena through Christian theological frameworks, emphasizing demonic possession rather than divine inspiration. The entry for 1066 describes Norwegian warriors at Stamford Bridge who fought with supernatural fury, wielding great axes that could cleave through both shield and mail with single blows. The Frankish annals provide detailed accounts of Viking military organization, revealing systematic integration of berserker units into larger expeditionary forces. The Annales Bertiniani described composition of Viking armies operating along the Seine and Loire rivers, noting presence of specialized warriors who served specific tactical functions during siege operations and pitched battles. These accounts indicate berserkers maintained distinctive equipment and fighting styles while operating within coordinated military frameworks, including conventional infantry, cavalry, and naval forces. Irish sources, particularly the Annals of Ulster and Annals of the Four Masters, document psychological impact of berserker warriors during Viking raids on monastic communities. These chronicles describe warriors who appeared to transform during battle, growing larger and more fearsome as combat progressed, their voices changing to inhuman roars that could be heard across entire battlefields. While these accounts reflect chroniclers' attempts to understand unfamiliar military practices through familiar religious concepts, they preserve valuable details about berserker combat behavior and tactical deployment. The integration of berserkers into Viking trading expeditions created opportunities for cultural exchange, influencing military traditions across vast geographic regions. Archaeological evidence from trading posts along the Volga River system reveals Scandinavian military equipment modified with local decorative elements, suggesting berserker warriors participated in commercial ventures extending far into Eastern Europe and Central Asia. These expeditions exposed berserkers to different combat techniques, weapon technologies, and military organizations influencing evolution of their own practices. The establishment of Viking settlements across the North Atlantic carried Berserker traditions to Iceland, Greenland, and eventually North America. Archaeological evidence from sites like Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland reveals presence of specialized military equipment consistent with Berserker practices, including oversized axes and animal-themed decorative items. The sagas describe how Berserker warriors participated in exploration and settlement of these distant territories, adapting traditional practices to new environments and tactical challenges. But then came the force that would ultimately destroy Berserker traditions more completely than any military defeat: Christianity. The gradual Christianization of Scandinavian societies during the 10th and 11th centuries created increasing tensions with traditional Berserker practices. Contemporary sources document efforts of Christian missionaries and converted rulers to suppress Berserker traditions, viewing them as incompatible with Christian theology and social order. The law of the Gulathing from Norway specifically prohibits Berserker practices, imposing severe penalties on warriors who engaged in traditional transformation rituals or claimed divine inspiration for their combat abilities. The legal suppression reflected broader changes in Scandinavian military organization, as centralized monarchies replaced decentralized warrior culture, sustaining Berserker traditions. Archaeological evidence from 11th century military sites reveals gradual disappearance of distinctive Berserker equipment and burial practices, replaced by standardized military gear, emphasizing uniform appearance and coordinated tactics over individual supernatural enhancement. The final documented appearances of traditional Berserkers occurred during major military campaigns of the mid-11th century, including battles of Stamford Bridge and Hastings in 1066. Contemporary accounts describe these warriors as remnants of earlier military tradition, becoming increasingly obsolete in face of evolving tactical systems and religious changes. The Norman conquest marked the effective end of Berserker participation in major European military campaigns, though modified versions of their traditions persisted in remote areas of Scandinavia for several additional centuries. The transformation from elite religious practitioners to marginalized outcasts reflected broader social changes accompanying the end of the Viking Age. The centralization of political power, adoption of Christianity, and development of professional military organizations created new frameworks for warrior identity, having no place for autonomous, divinely inspired fighters who had dominated earlier periods. Archaeological evidence from the 12th century reveals final disappearance of distinctive Berserker material culture, marking the end of a military tradition that had shaped Northern European warfare for over 3 centuries. But their story didn't end with their physical extinction. It transformed into something else entirely. The transformation into literary archetypes began during the 12th and 13th centuries as Icelandic saga writers drew upon oral traditions, historical memories, and contemporary social concerns to create complex narratives that both preserved and reimagined the Berserker phenomenon. Egil's saga, composed around 1230 AD, presents one of the most nuanced portrayals of Berserker psychology and social integration. The saga describes how Egil's father, Skallagrim, possessed Berserker traits manifesting during moments of intense anger, transforming him from respected farmer into dangerous figure whose own family feared his presence. Skallagrim's Berserker episodes follow patterns reflecting genuine historical understanding while serving specific literary functions. The saga describes how his face would darken and swell, his strength would increase dramatically, and he would become virtually unrecognizable. During one particularly detailed episode, Skallagrim attacks his own son during a ball game, nearly killing the boy before the Berserker fury subsides, and he realizes what he's done. This portrayal demonstrates the saga author's familiarity with actual Berserker behavior, while using these episodes to explore themes of family dysfunction and social alienation. The Volsunga saga provides different perspective by integrating Berserker elements into legendary narratives, blurring boundaries between historical memory and mythological storytelling. The saga's portrayal of Sigmund and his descendants incorporates Berserker elements into broader framework of heroic literature, emphasizing supernatural abilities while maintaining connections to recognizable warrior practices. The bear warrior elements appear most prominently in episodes involving Sigmund's forest exile, where he and his son Sinfjotli discover wolf pelts, enabling them to transform into wolves for 10 days at a time. The literary evolution of Berserker portrayals reveals changing attitudes toward violence and social order, as Icelandic society developed more sophisticated legal and religious institutions. Early saga literature tends to present Berserker abilities as divine gifts enhancing warrior effectiveness, while later works increasingly emphasize social costs and personal isolation associated with these supernatural traits. The gradual transformation from honored warriors to literary archetypes reflects not just changing social values, but the complete extinction of a warrior tradition that had defined Northern European warfare for centuries. Modern archaeological research has systematically challenged romantic interpretations of Berserker culture while revealing sophisticated nature of their military organization and social integration. Excavations at training sites have revealed complex facilities designed for coordinated military exercises rather than individual warrior development, indicating Berserkers operated within disciplined military frameworks. Analysis of Berserker equipment reveals standardized production methods and quality control requiring extensive craft specialization, contradicting images of primitive warriors using crude weapons. The influence of Berserker imagery on Scandinavian cultural identity and military heritage has evolved significantly since the medieval period, reflecting changing political circumstances and cultural values, while maintaining connections to ancient warrior traditions. The Norwegian Army's Telemark Battalion incorporates bear symbolism derived from Berserker traditions into unit insignia and ceremonial practices, while training exercises emphasize psychological conditioning and unit cohesion, characterizing historical Berserker brotherhoods. These modern adaptations demonstrate continuing relevance of Berserker tactical concepts while maintaining clear distinctions between historical practices and contemporary military professionalism. This is the complete story of the Berserkers, from Bronze Age warrior cults through Viking Age dominance to Christian suppression and modern legacy. They weren't savage barbarians high on mushrooms. They were sophisticated religious warriors trained from youth in complex transformation techniques, combining psychology, spirituality, and brutal military training. They served kings and gods, dominated battlefields across 3 continents, and left a legacy influencing military psychology to this day. If you enjoyed this journey through one of history's most misunderstood warrior traditions, subscribe to Flow of History for more deep dives into the past that shaped our present. Because history isn't just about facts, it's about understanding the remarkable complexity of human experience across time.